What really happens when an INFJ finally snaps? People often think of INFJs as calm, compassionate, and endlessly forgiving, but that's only half the truth. Behind their quiet patience lies a breaking point that few ever see coming. When an INFJ has been pushed too far, their reaction isn't loud, dramatic, or chaotic. It's controlled, calculated, and powerful in ways that leave people stunned. This isn't just anger, it's the release of years of silent observation, suppressed emotion, and unspoken truths, all surfacing at once. And when it does, the shift is so profound that it changes relationships forever. Some call it cold, others call it ruthless. But for an INFJ, snapping is never random. It's survival. In this video, we'll uncover exactly what happens when an INFJ finally reaches their limit, why it shocks the people around them, and how it transforms the INFJ themselves. If you've ever wondered what lies behind the calm exterior of an INFJ, stick around until the end, because the final point will reveal the most shocking part of their transformation. And before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to BRAINY and hit the bell icon so you never miss the deeper truths about INFJs and psychology that most people overlook. The silent buildup. An INFJ snapping doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of a long, quiet process that often goes unnoticed by everyone around them. This first stage, the silent buildup, is where the storm begins, but it's hidden behind calm eyes, polite smiles, and carefully measured words. While most people express their frustrations as they come, INFJs tend to internalize. They listen, observe, and absorb far more than they reveal. Every slight remark, every betrayal, every subtle act of disrespect, it all gets stored deep within them. The silence during this phase isn't forgiveness or indifference. It's their way of cataloging experiences, weighing people's intentions, and trying to rationalize what's happening. They'll often excuse others' behavior at first, telling themselves it wasn't personal or that they might be overreacting. But internally, their intuition is keeping score. They don't forget, even when they don't bring it up. The longer this continues, the heavier the weight becomes until the INFJ feels like they're carrying a vault of unspoken pain. What makes this buildup so dangerous is that nobody else notices it happening. On the outside, INFJs appear composed, even supportive. They'll still smile, help, and offer advice, but behind that warmth is a growing distance. They're already beginning to detach, long before they say a word. Friends, partners, or colleagues may think everything is fine, but the INFJ knows the relationship is shifting. This stage is also where the INFJ's perfectionism plays a role. They want to give people chances, they want to believe in the good, and they want to hold on to harmony. So instead of confronting, they endure. Instead of exploding, they retreat deeper inside themselves. But every time they suppress their feelings, the pressure builds higher. By the time an INFJ reaches the point of snapping, it's not about one moment, it's about 100 moments stacked on top of each other. The silent buildup is the warning sign most people miss. It's the calm before the storm, the invisible tension that grows stronger with every unspoken hurt. And once it reaches capacity, there's no turning back. The INFJ will unleash the truth, and the shift will be permanent. The breaking point. The breaking point for an INFJ is rarely explosive in the way most people imagine. It's not shouting, slamming doors, or creating scenes. Instead, it's a quiet but undeniable shift, a moment when the INFJ decides enough is enough. Everything they've been bottling up during the silent buildup finally reaches a threshold, and once it's crossed, there is no going back. The stage often looks confusing to outsiders because there's no obvious trigger. The comment, action, or betrayal that pushes an INFJ over the edge may seem small on its own, but it's the final straw on a mountain of hidden hurts. To the INFJ, this moment feels like clarity. The fog of self-doubt clears, and they suddenly see the situation for what it is: unsustainable. Their intuition, which has been whispering all along, now speaks so loudly they can't ignore it anymore. At this point, the INFJ's demeanor changes. They may still appear calm on the outside, but internally, a door has closed. The endless rationalizations, the excuses they gave others, and the patience they stretched to the breaking point are gone. What replaces them is resolve. They stop hoping the other person will change, stop waiting for understanding, and stop sacrificing their peace. The breaking point doesn't always come with words. In fact, most INFJs won't launch into arguments or demand explanations. Instead, they pull back their emotional investment instantly, where once they offered warmth, attention, and support, now there's only distance. This change is so sudden and absolute that people who took their loyalty for granted are left stunned. What outsiders often miss is that this isn't impulsive. By the time an INFJ reaches the breaking point, they've given countless silent chances. They've endured quietly, tried to see the best in others, and extended more grace than most people deserve. The breaking point isn't rage, it's self-preservation. It's the INFJ finally deciding that protecting their inner world matters more than clinging to something toxic. And once this point is reached, the relationship dynamic or situation is forever changed. The INFJ may not shout it from the rooftops, but in their mind, the line has been drawn. From here on out, everything will unfold differently, and often irreversibly. Emotional release. When an INFJ finally reaches the stage of emotional release, it is both powerful and unsettling because it rarely looks the way others expect. Instead of fiery explosions or dramatic outbursts, the INFJ's release is controlled, precise, and deeply emotional. It's the moment where all the quiet suffering, the silent resentment, and the breaking point merge into one undeniable expression of truth. For a long time, INFJs hold everything in. They don't want to burden others, they don't want to cause conflict, and they don't want to be misunderstood. But when the release comes, it can feel like years of unspoken pain pouring out at once. Sometimes it happens in tears, sometimes in a sudden rush of words that cut sharper than a blade, and sometimes in a cold withdrawal that leaves the other person stunned. What makes it different from other types of anger is the depth. This release is not impulsive, it's earned through endurance. The emotional release often shocks people because INFJs usually come across as calm, composed, and compassionate. To see them break their silence and express the depth of their hurt makes others realize just how long the INFJ has been holding on. It's not just about the final straw, it's about all the unacknowledged pain that led up to this point. This is why their release often feels so heavy, almost disproportionate to the situation. But in truth, it is perfectly proportionate to the weight they've carried alone for so long. At this stage, INFJs don't necessarily care about being understood. The release isn't meant to win sympathy. It's meant to free themselves. Whether through a cutting statement, a heartfelt confession, or complete silence, the INFJ is no longer holding the pain inside. It spills out in a way that clears space for healing, even if it costs them the relationship, friendship, or situation. To others, it can feel like the INFJ suddenly transformed, but in reality, this emotional release is simply the unveiling of everything they've been too patient, too kind, or too afraid to show. It's not vengeance, but liberation, and once it happens, there's no putting things back the way they were. Cold detachment. After the emotional release, when an INFJ finally lets go of all the bottled up weight, something even more unsettling often follows: cold detachment. This is the moment when their emotions no longer fuel the situation. Instead, they switch into a state of calm, almost icy clarity. To those on the receiving end, this sudden change can feel colder and harsher than any words of anger, because it means the INFJ has stopped fighting to hold the connection together. INFJs are known for their deep empathy and loyalty. They pour themselves into relationships, friendships, and commitments, often giving more than they receive. But once they feel repeatedly hurt, betrayed, or taken for granted, a shift happens. Their warmth, once steady and reliable, is replaced by an almost surgical withdrawal of energy. They no longer seek resolution, no longer explain their silence, and no longer fight to be heard. Instead, they build walls that shut out the very people who once had access to their heart. What makes INFJ detachment so impactful is the contrast. People who are used to their compassion and attentiveness suddenly find themselves facing a version of the INFJ that is unrecognizable, distant, guarded, and unreachable. Unlike anger, which still implies emotional investment, detachment is the sign that the INFJ has truly had enough. The bond isn't just strained, it's broken. This cold detachment is often misunderstood as cruelty or indifference, but in reality, it is a form of self-protection. For the INFJ, continuing to pour energy into a toxic or unbalanced connection is no longer worth the emotional cost. They retreat to preserve their peace, to rebuild themselves, and to prevent further damage. In their mind, silence is not a punishment, it's survival. The people left behind, however, often feel the sting of this detachment more deeply than any confrontation. Suddenly, the INFJ who once gave them endless understanding is gone. The cold distance acts as a mirror, forcing them to confront the pain they caused. But by then, it's usually too late. Once an INFJ reaches this stage, there's rarely any going back. Unmasking the truth. When an INFJ finally snaps, one of the most shocking stages they move into is unmasking the truth. INFJs spend a lot of time observing, analyzing, and noticing details others overlook. They don't always call things out immediately, but they keep mental notes, storing every inconsistency, every subtle betrayal, and every manipulative move in silence. By the time they reach their breaking point, they've gathered enough clarity to see the truth for what it is, and once they decide to reveal it, the impact is devastating. Unlike people who lash out impulsively, INFJs deliver truth like a scalpel, not a hammer. They don't need to scream or argue. Instead, they expose the hidden patterns, the manipulations, and the real motives with unnerving precision. Their ability to connect dots that others miss means they can lay out a picture so clear that it becomes impossible to deny. To those on the receiving end, it feels like being seen through completely, like all their masks, excuses, and defenses have been ripped away in an instant. This stage often shocks people because INFJs don't fight often. Their usual preference is to keep the peace, to withdraw quietly, or to forgive silently. But when pushed past their limit, the restraint breaks, and all the unspoken truths they've been holding back come to the surface. They might point out lies that were told months ago, hypocrisies others thought were hidden, or manipulative behaviors disguised as care. And the most unsettling part is that they're usually right. The unmasking doesn't always happen out loud either. Sometimes it comes through silence, a withdrawal so sharp that the other person suddenly sees themselves clearly without the INFJ having to say a single word. Other times, it's a calm confrontation where the INFJ simply states facts in a way that cuts deeper than any heated argument ever could. For the INFJ, unmasking the truth isn't about revenge, it's about liberation. It's the moment they reclaim their power by refusing to carry the weight of deception any longer. Once the truth is revealed, they no longer feel bound to the connection, and for the other person, the realization often comes too late. The INFJ has already moved on, leaving behind a truth that can't be unseen. Walking away without warning. One of the harshest realities of an INFJ snapping is their ability to walk away without warning. Unlike other personalities who demand closure, argue endlessly, or seek validation, INFJs don't feel the need to explain themselves once the final decision is made. By the time they've reached this point, they've already analyzed the situation from every angle, replayed every conversation in their mind, and quietly grieved the loss long before the actual exit. To the outside world, their sudden disappearance feels cold, shocking, and even cruel, but for the INFJ, it's simply the last step in a long, silent process. What makes this so powerful and painful is that INFJs rarely give hints when the final cutoff is coming. They may grow quieter, more distant, or subtly withdrawn, but they won't make loud threats or dramatic announcements. Instead, they internalize everything until the tipping point arrives, and when it does, they can sever ties with stunning decisiveness. No long goodbye, no angry confrontation, just a locked door that never reopens. For those left behind, this feels like abandonment without answers. People often wonder, what happened? What did I do wrong? The truth is, INFJs already gave chances along the way through their patience, their silence, and their attempts to endure. But once their trust or loyalty has been violated enough times, they don't need one final fight. Their walking away is both the punishment and the healing. The most unsettling part is how final it feels. While others might leave with lingering attachments or hopes of reconciliation, INFJs rarely look back once they've made the choice. They walk away cleanly, carrying with them their integrity, peace, and emotional clarity. The other person, however, is left haunted by the sudden emptiness, the absence of the INFJ's warmth, attention, and deep emotional presence. This stage reveals one of the INFJ's hidden strengths. They don't cling to what no longer serves them. Walking away without warning is not about cruelty, it's about self-preservation. It's the INFJ's way of reclaiming power after being pushed too far. And once they've walked away, the silence they leave behind says more than words ever could. Transformation through pain. When an INFJ finally snaps, the aftermath isn't just about anger or detachment, it's about transformation. Unlike many who let pain consume them, INFJs turn pain into a catalyst for growth. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every disappointment becomes raw material for their evolution. It doesn't happen overnight, but slowly, the very experiences that wounded them are alchemized into wisdom, resilience, and strength that others rarely develop. For INFJs, pain isn't wasted. They analyze it deeply, reflect on the lessons, and use it as a mirror to better understand both themselves and the people around them. Instead of asking, "Why me?" they ask, "What is this teaching me?" That shift in perspective transforms what could have been permanent damage into a stepping stone for personal rebirth. While others may stay stuck in bitterness, INFJs rebuild their inner world, brick by brick, stronger and clearer than before. This transformation often shocks people who once underestimated them. The same INFJ who seemed broken and withdrawn emerges later with a quiet strength that can't be shaken. They don't come back louder or vengeful. They come back more focused, more purposeful, and more grounded in who they truly are. The pain that once silenced them becomes the fire that fuels their vision, creativity, and compassion. But this process comes at a cost. Transformation through pain means INFJs rarely return to who they were before. They become sharper, more discerning, and less willing to tolerate what they once did. To those who hurt them, this change feels like a wall. To the INFJ, it feels like freedom. The transformation is permanent, and it ensures that the same wound won't be inflicted twice. Ultimately, this stage is why INFJs are often seen as mysterious survivors. They don't just endure suffering, they reshape it. Their pain forges a version of themselves that others can't control, manipulate, or break again. And while people may regret the role they played in causing that transformation, for the INFJ, it's the ultimate victory, turning their deepest wounds into the foundation of their strength. The permanent shift. When an INFJ finally snaps, the change that follows isn't temporary, it's permanent. This is the stage most people never see coming because they expect time to heal things back to normal. But for an INFJ, once trust has been broken and the inner switch has flipped, they don't return to who they were before. Instead, they step into a new version of themselves, one that is sharper, wiser, and less forgiving of the patterns that hurt them in the past. The permanent shift means the INFJ no longer offers the same softness, openness, or patience to the person who crossed their line. Where they once gave second chances, they now give silence. Where they once overlooked flaws, they now set firm boundaries. The INFJ hasn't become cruel or bitter, they've simply learned. Pain taught them to protect themselves, and once that lesson is absorbed, it doesn't get unlearned. And yet, to outsiders, this shift can feel shocking. The warm, empathetic, endlessly giving INFJ seems to vanish, replaced by someone more guarded and resolute. But this isn't a mask, it's growth. It's the result of transforming hurt into wisdom and disappointment into clarity. People often misinterpret this shift as coldness, when in reality, it's strength. The INFJ no longer allows themselves to be broken in the same way twice. The most unsettling part for others is that the INFJ rarely announces this change. There are no dramatic speeches, no drawn-out confrontations. They simply embody the shift in how they move, how they speak, and how they prioritize their energy. And once they've moved into this new state, there's no going back to the innocence of before. This permanent shift ensures that the INFJ's life keeps moving forward, stronger, lighter, and free from the weight of people who proved unworthy of their trust. While others may regret the loss or cling to the memory of who the INFJ used to be, the INFJ has already stepped into their next chapter. It's not revenge and it's not bitterness, it's simply evolution. And that evolution is irreversible. And that's what really happens when an INFJ finally snaps. It's not about anger or revenge, it's about transformation. Once they reach their breaking point, they don't just react, they evolve. The silence, the withdrawal, the detachment, all of it is a doorway into a stronger, wiser, more resilient version of themselves. And for anyone on the receiving end, the hardest truth is this: once an INFJ makes that permanent shift, there's no going back. If you found yourself resonating with these stages, you already know how powerful an INFJ's growth can be once the line is crossed. But here's my question for you. Do you think INFJ snapping is a form of protection, or is it the final act of letting go completely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if this video spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the INFJ mind.